All right, today's daf is Kuf Chaf Chet 128. We are at the bottom of Kuf Chaf Zion. Let me share my screen and we will get started.
The same.
So hold on just a second. Here we go.
We're gonna have Washma.
We're gonna have Rashbam, absolutely. We're gonna have Rashbam. We have even a little bit of Tosfos. In fact, you know what? Just for you, Mark, we're gonna do a Rashbam before we even get started.
Oh wow.
But let's at least frame. We're talking about the rights of firstborn sons. And we concluded yesterday with a discussion about a father's ability to identify one of his sons as the firstborn. So we're going to pick up now on the second to last line of 127b. Kuf Chav Zayin Amabet. The Gemara shares a series of 7 rulings sent by Rabbi Abba to Rabbi Yosef Bar Chama, one of which will relate to the identification of a firstborn. So let's take a look. We'll see in Rashbam as he notes this. Shalach le Rabbi Abba, second to last line in the Rashbam on the bottom of Kuf Chav Zayin Amabet. Kol Hani, all of these, Shalach le Rabbi Abba le Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Abba sent them all to Rabbi Yosef Bar Chama. Nakat Haka, and it's all placed here, Mishum de Bechad Minaya, because in one of them, Papasik Hilchas Rabbi Yehuda, he's going to actually tell us that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. And remember that we had a debate between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. Rabbi Yehuda says that even if I would have thought that Alfie, even if the whole world thinks that Alfie is the firstborn, if a father says that Beatty is the firstborn, so we're going to, so be it, and we're going to believe him. Ubakulo, and we are going to hear at the very end of today, this is going to be our conclusion, and you'll know that we're at the end when we get to this point. We're going to say that the halacha is like Rabbi Abba in all of them. And as we're going to say at the end of this discussion. So let's take a look. Now back into the text again, second to last line. Middle of the line, Shalach le Rabbi Abba le Rabbi Yosef Bar Chama. Ha'omer lechaveru, if you say to your friend, again, all but the second don't really relate to the discussion that we're having about firstborns, but we'll get to the second one, and then we'll deal with the, like I said, the other 6 as well. So number 1, Ha'omer lechaveru, you say to your friend, Avdi ganavti, you stole my slave. V'hu omer lo ganavti, I did not steal your slave. Well, what's he doing by you? And we turn to you either sold it to me or you gave it to me as a present. Meaning, I'm not gonna say both of them. I'm gonna say whichever one is relevant. But I add to the end after saying that I didn't steal the slave. Ritzonka, if you want, he shaveh avitol. You can actually swear that he belongs to you and you can take. Now, this oath that I am suggesting that you make, let's take a look at the top Rashbam. I'm believed in this claim. You have no rights. Once I make this claim, where you have no rights. That even though we say in the Parakos back early on, Daf Lamed Vavim Nalef Hagodros Ein Lahen Chazaka, that when it comes to movable items that can go on their own, they don't have a chazaka. Hanimili alter. That's talking about they don't have a chazaka immediately. Meaning, if your animal, your cat walks into my property, I don't immediately own your cat, right? But if your cat is in my property for 3 years, and I say that I bought it, well, then I'm going to be believed. Meaning, if I say that I bought your cat and it's there one day, that's not enough for me to be believed because your cat probably walked into my property. So, avalach or gimel shanim, but after 3 years, yesh lehen chazaka, then they'll have a chazaka. And so the case that we're talking about here is where there was a chazaka for 3 years. Or a minor that's unable to move. The yesh lo chazaka alter that would have a chazaka immediately. Oh, be'ebed shelo ra'oto be'edim zeh hama'ara bebeito shel zeh. Or we could be talking about where you stand as the claimant against me, saying, what's my slave doing in your house? You don't have any witnesses that he's in my house. The only evidence that you have that he's in my house is that I admit that he's in my house. Well, in that situation, I would have the chazaka earlier, because we have the concept of pella sha'asar pesha hitter, that the mouth that is obligating me is also the mouth that is exempting me, and so as a result, I should be exempt. So that's the bottom line. Interestingly, all right, I'm going to stop there. Okay, so that's so if I say to you, all right, well, if you want, you could swear and take the nishba, and then you actually swear, Eino Yachal Lagzerbo, even though I had no right to go back to I had no obligation to give you the right to swear and take. Once I give you that right and you swear, I can't go back because you've sworn. Okay. So my Kamash Milan. So the Gemara asks us, I don't understand. What is Rabbi Abba teaching us? Because what you just said is the majority opinion in a brisa. Tanino, we've got it already in a Mishnah. We have it in a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Sanhedrin, Dav Kaf Dalin Amud Aleph. Amar Lo, if one of the litigants say, Neman alai Abba, my father is trustworthy to be a judge to me. Now, I'm not sure that the other side would agree to that, but maybe the father is estranged, but whatever. And so the other person agrees. Neman alai Avicha, but your father is trustworthy to me, meaning even though he's your father, I know he's an honest guy. I'm fine to have him as a judge at this trial of our litigation. Ne'emanim alai shlosha roe vakar. Or I agree that these 3 cattle herders are trustworthy. So, and Rashbam points out, Ne'eman alai Abba. Let's take a look at that. It's 1, 2, 3, 6 lines up in the narrow lines of the Rashbam. Leo Dayan, in order to be a judge. Abba Pasul min Torah. A father is invalid from the Torah. Lidonenu lo l'schus v'lo l'chova. He can't judge a case, right? If your father were to judge a case with you, Mark, do you think that he would be biased?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too. Most fathers would be. So, and as a result, we're not going to allow that to happen. Kanaf Galan Sanhedrin, as we're going to see in Sanhedrin. And how do we learn it? Lo yumasu avos. Lo yumsu avos albanim, meaning that the fathers shouldn't cause the sons to die, and vice versa. So, as a result of that pasuk, we learn from that fathers can't, and sons, obviously, both goes in both directions, can't be judges for each other. So, but if I say that it is, then what happened? Oh, and Shlosha Roe Bakar. What about these 3 shepherds? And it's interesting because it says Roe Bakar. Bakar are cattle; those are large animals. And She'enim Beki and Bedin. And the point is that they don't know. They're very simple people, these shepherds, so they don't know any of the details of the judgment. And yet, if I say that they are, we're going to see that at least one opinion is going to say that they can be judges, and I can't go back on it. The roe tzon lo naka. Now, note again here, it said roe bakar. It did not say roe tzon. Tzon are small animals. Now, we have a principle, mishum de rishoim ninhu. The reason that it didn't say tzon is because we have a principle that the shepherds of small animals are considered wicked. To stam roe behema daka, because those shepherds of small animals, gazlaninhu, they tend to be thieves because they allow the small animals to graze in places where they don't belong to them, because it's very easy for them to get in and get out because they're small animals. Whereas a large animal is more likely to knock something over, do some real damage, and as a result, they don't want to let them into somebody else's stuff because they're worried about something bad happening. So that's why small animals are considered, people who do who are shepherds for small animals are considered pasul. Upasulin l'kol din sheba'olam, and these judges are pasul for any kind of matter. Meaning, this you can understand this Rashbam either referring back to the Shloshe Roe Bakar or to even the Shloshe Roe Stone. But the bottom line is that whoever they are, because they have no knowledge whatsoever about what they're talking about, they aren't good judges for any matter. Aval Abba Avicha, but my father and your father, ksherin. They would be kosher, mia ladina and shalacherim, as long as they were judging somebody else's matter. So they have enough knowledge. So that's the Rashbam's point there. So we have these three different cases, but we haven't yet said what the outcome is. So Rabbi Meir says, Yachol Lachzerbo. He can reverse himself. Why can he reverse himself? Because as we continue in the Rashbam on the second of the medium lines on Daf Kuf Ket Amud Aleph, Yachol Lachzerbo at the end of the line, did Dvarim Ba'alma. All he said is just merely words below Kinyan, who Amrlai, without any kind of action of a Kinyan type, of a making of an acquisition. There was no action that was taken to confirm the words that he said. And so as a result, according to Rabbi Meir, he can retract. But Chachamim say, no, you can't retract. And the Rashbam continues, and so why did we bring this? We brought this machlokas all the way, because we said, what was Rabbi Abba teaching us? Rabbi Abba said that if I say to you that that you can swear and take your slave, then I have to live by it. So the same thing would apply to somebody who's claiming a slave. Vinotel, that you could swear and take. That in both cases, even though the strict letter of the law is not like that, since the person accepted on himself the obligation, he can't retract. So we'll stop there in the Rashbam and go back into the Gemara. And so now we understand the question, right? The question is, what is Rabbi Abba teaching us that isn't already said effectively by the Chachamim in this Mishnah? So Hakamashmalan. So the Gemara tells us this is what the Gemara is teaching us. This is what Rabbi Abba is teaching us. That the machlokes between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim even applies when I'm going to give you, right? The nature of the way it was said, it was a machlokes about who the judges are.
Right.
That doesn't say that I'm going to commit myself to do an action. It just says I'm willing to accept these people as judges. But maybe if I accept on myself an action to do something, maybe there I would need a kinyan. And so the Kamash Malan is no, that the machlokes between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim also applies where I say I'm going to give you something. The halacha kedivrei Chachamim. And not only that, but the halacha is like the Chachamim. And so as a result, it is necessary for Rabbi Abba to teach this lesson.
Well,
so
what is the halacha then, according to Chachamim?
The halacha is that if you say that either certain people you're accepting as judges, or you say that if you swear to something, I'll give you an item. Well, then in all those cases, if that's what happens, you have to live with the consequences. So either the case is considered a definitive case, and you have to live with whatever the judges say because you accepted them. And of course, this is the basis for arbitration. Even though, of course, we usually, especially in when we have based in, we usually have experts in the particular areas that the matter that is going to be discussed. But the bottom line is whether or not they are experts. If you agree to them being the judges, well, then guess what? That's going to be how it is. And similarly, if you agree that if somebody's going to swear, you'll give them something that it belongs to them, even though you don't need to give them that right, and you give them that right, you're going to need to give them the thing if they go ahead and swear. Okay. So that's the lessons of this first report sent by Rabbi Abba. Now we go to the second report. So the second ruling that Rabbi Abba sent to Rabbi Yosef, which relates to the fact that creditors of a deceased may generally only collect from real property. Okay. I'm sorry. This This is not the one that relates to firstborns. Actually, I think that was going to be maybe the sixth. So this one we're going to is also important in that we're going to come back and question it. But let's take a look and see what it is. So Shalach le Rabbi Abba le Rav Yosef Bar Chama halacha govim min ha'avadim. Right. So we're at the two dots on Kuf Chet Amud Aleph. The halacha is that you can collect from slaves. So Rashbam, of course, helps us out here. That what are you talking about? Fourth wide line, middle of the line. Govim min ha'avadim, that you can collect from slaves. Balchov shemes go shemes, when a debtor or a borrower, I should call him, dies. Govim avdei yisomim. You can take what is owed to you from the slaves of the orphans that the orphans inherit. Dummy, because slaves are compared to land, and you're allowed to collect from land, so too you should be allowed to collect from slaves. And in this case alone, who delays Hilchasa Rabbi Abba? We're going to say, even though that we're going to say in the end that the halacha is like Rabbi Abba in all the cases, in this case we're going to change our mind. Ulakaman mitartzinan la va'amrinan haki katani ein govin v'chein amar Rabbi Nachman. And in the end, we're going to reword this statement and in order to allow it to be consistent with the end of the statement, because at the end of the statement, as we go back into the Gemara, middle of the line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines into the Gemara. Rav Nachman Amar Ein Govin. Rav Nachman says you cannot collect from slaves, and we generally paskin in monetary matters like Rav Nachman, and so as a result, in the end, we're going to change Rabbi Abba's statement to be consistent with Rav Nachman, because otherwise it would be inconsistent, and we would have we'd be saying that the halakha is like Rabbi Abba and the halakha is like Rav Nachman, and that would be contradictory. So in order to eliminate the contradiction, we're going to reread this and say that the halakha is Ein Govin Min Ha'avadim and V'chein Amar Rav Nachman, and that's exactly how we're going to conclude. But in any event, that's where we're going to leave it for now. But the bottom line is that we may not collect from slaves of orphans. If you have a debt that is owed you by their father. Okay, so ruling number 3, Shalach le Rabbi Abba le Rav Yosef, Rav Yosef Arkama, Halakha Shlishi B'Sheni Kasher. So this Shlishi is referring to the third generation. The third generation, meaning a grandchild, right? No, first generation. A great-grandchild is allowed to testify, Bisheni, is allowed to testify about a grandchild. Now, of course, we're not talking about where the grandchild is a parent or a sibling of the parent. That would be referred to differently. But the one common ancestor that the two people have is the great-grandfather of one and the grandfather of the other. In most societies, we would call that a first cousin once removed. Correct. Right? A first cousin once removed. So Rabbi Abba testifies that you can testify about a first cousin once removed, meaning you can't testify about a direct first cousin, but you can testify about a first cousin once removed. Rav Amar Af Berishon. Not only can you testify about, not only can the great-grandchild testify about this one generation first cousin once removed, but he can even testify about his great uncle, meaning the one generation down that isn't his, so his grandfather's brother, and so that he's able to testify about that as well. Mar bar Rav Ashi, Akshar ba'aba da'aba. Mar bar Rav Ashi ruled remarkably that when it says that you can't testify about your immediate relative, it means your immediate relative. And so as a result, you can testify about your grandfather. However, the halakha is not like Mar bar Rav Ashi. Now, a couple of interesting things to note here. First, let's take a look at the first the second Tosos on Kuf Chaf Chet Amud Aleph. Mar bar Rav Ashi mechasher ba'aba da'aba. Be'im tomar, 1 second. How can you say that? V'halo afilu sheni b'sheni amar b'perek zeh borer depasol b'kol shekain zikno. Well, 1 second. You're not allowed to testify about your cousin, That is explicit. Well, if you can't testify about your cousin, how are you related to your cousin? You're related to your cousin because your grandfather is his grandfather, right?
Right.
You know, I mean, you're one of your
Right.
grandparents. So if the way you get from a relationship perspective to this cousin is through the grandfather, how can it possibly be the case that you can testify against your grandfather? You can't testify even against the cousin, which is essentially
More removed.
more removed. Exactly. You have to go 4 jumps, right? If you think about the jumps, you jump to the father, then the grandfather, then the uncle, and then the cousin. And so, how isn't that more removed? The Yesh Lomar, one can say the Abba de Abba kosher tvei it palig dara. No, what makes a difference is the separation of generations. And this is teaching an interesting principle that on some level, when the relationship we have with our relatives, the generation matters, meaning that the experience, the shared life experiences that we have by being the same generation actually can make a very big difference in how we relate to one another and the connection that we feel to one another. So I think it's a truth that is recognized here. All right, let's go down to take a look in the Rashbam. Rashbam then says, in connection with Leis Hilchos Kamar Baravashi, it's basically the middle of the widest lines. And it
You
says
share you share the grandparents with the cousin.
Yes.
So you're related very, very closely because the parents are siblings.
Right, but so the question that the Tosfos is asking is how can Mar Baravashi have even thought to have said that you're allowed to testify against the grandparent if you're not allowed to testify against the cousin? Because yes, a cousin is close, but one would think, Mark, they could use your help. Okay, that if one would think that a cousin, see you tomorrow, one would think that a cousin is further than a grandparent.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I don't know what you just take that bag that you got and you'll do the best that you can.
Well, don't give me your bag. Do that.
Okay. So now into the Rashbam.
So the cousin is further than the grandparent.
I'm sorry.
So
That's the question that Tosfos asks, and the response is no. Actually, that the different generation that a grandparent is from a grandchild makes it as if it's further than a cousin. That's the answer that Tosfos gives.
So they could testify for a grandparent.
I can't hear you. Sorry, say it
So
again.
you're saying he could testify for a grandparent then, but not
That's
for
what
a
Mar
cousin.
Baravashi says. But of course, the halakha is not like Mar Baravashi, as we saw and as we're about to read in the Rashbam. The Leis Hilchos of Kamar Baravashi. The halakha is not like Mar Baravashi. The b'nei banim, b'nei banim, that grandchildren and great grandchildren ad elef doros, even to 1,000 generations, lo yeidu lavosayim. They don't have the right to testify about their ancestors. The ben yerech avivhu, that basically the son of who's on his thigh is like the father. So the point is that as long as there's this kind of parent relationship, we're not going to we're going to say that you can't testify. Now, Tosfos has a real problem with that. So take a look at the second to last Tosfos on the top. Leis Hilchos of Kamar Baravashi, Perish B'Kundras Dafilad So Kol Adoros. Puzzle, that even until the end of all generations, you'd be puzzled. Now, that's not actually literally what he said, but in any event, it's close enough. The Ainira, Lari, but the Reed disagrees. Kaven to Ispalig, Dara Kolkak. Once you have so many generations separate, you know what? Maybe you could testify. And so the bottom line is, it seems like, and I have not looked at the halakha on this, you might be able to say that a great grandchild could potentially testify about a grandparent, a great grandparent. Okay, so that was number 3 of the reports, and now we go to number 4 of the reports.
Is it testifying about him while he's alive, or
yes, of course, absolutely. It's while the person's alive.
Well, how many generations? I mean, you
Yeah,
get
that's well. I mean, you can have potentially if the next generation is born at the age of 21, and you live to 105, you can have 7 generations, right? Is that right? Am I getting that? Six
five,
generations.
maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah. So 6 generations is you, child, grandchild, great grandchild,
Great,
great
great,
great
great
grandchild,
grandchild.
great 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 grandchild. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
It's well
Right,
moved. Let's
right,
put it that way.
exactly. So again, that's why there's the machlokas between Tosas and Rashba. All right, so Shalach le Rabbi Abba le Rabbi Yosef bar Chama, number 4. Haya yodea lo be'edus karka. If somebody knows testimony about land, ad shelo nistame, before that person became blind, nistame, and then he became blind, puzzle. He's no longer qualified. Shmuel Amar, kosher. No, Shmuel says that just because he became blind doesn't make him unqualified. Maybe he will know the boundaries of al galima. But to testify about a garment, then the person who became blind won't be able to do it. Rav Sheshes Amar afilu galima. No, even a garment he can testify because after the mechaven midas arko midas rakbo, because he could give garments in those days was generally just a sheet. And so if you give the exact measurements of the sheet, well, then obviously you know exactly which garment you're talking about. Aval naska lo. But when it came to a bar of metal, well, then that would not work. Rav Papa, because bars of metal tend to have a standard size. Rav Papa Amar afilo naska. No, even a metal bar. After the mechaven midas mashkalosav. No, because even though they have a general size, the metal bars are likely to have a little bit of a different weight, each one to another. So as a result, if you know the exact weight, Rav Papa says that even if the person became blind, that could be an okay way of going. So Meisvei, they asked the challenge to the opinions of Shmuel, Rav Sheshes, and Rav Papa from the following brisa. If somebody knows testimony, ad shelo nasa chasano, before he became somebody's son-in-law, the nasa chasano, and now he became the son-in-law, pikeach, or he was a normal person, the nischarish, and he became a deaf mute, piteach, or he was able to see, v'nistame, and he became blind, shafoy v'nishtatata, he was sane and he became insane. Puzzle, in all those cases, he's no longer qualified to testify. It seems like no matter what the change happened. And so as a result, that disagrees with Shmuel, Rav Sheshes, and Rav Papa. Aval haya yodea be'edus. If, however, he knows the testimony, ashelo nasa chasano, before he became the son-in-law, v'nasa chasano, and then he became the son-in-law, umesa bito, and then the daughter died, so he's no longer the son-in-law, or pikeach v'nischarish v'chazav v'nispikeach, he was normal, became deaf mute, then became normal again, be able to speak again. Or he was able to see, he became blind, and then he became able to see again. Or or he was sane, became insane, and then became sane again. Kasher, in all those cases, he's kosher to testify because ze'aklal kol shetchilaso o sofo paslut pasul. If the beginning or the end is when you're disqualified, then you're disqualified. Aval, but the word aval is not in the Gemara, but tchilaso v'sova b'kashros, if in fact the beginning and the end are when you're qualified, well then kasher, then you are kosher to testify. So isn't that a contradiction to Shmuel, Rav Sheshes, and Rav Papa? And the answer is, as we turn to Kuf Chaf Chet Amabet, to Yufta, to Kulo, to Yufta. In fact, it is a refutation, and so as a result, we see that in fact that Rabbi Abba is correct. And again, as I said at the beginning, we are going to see at the very end that Rabbi Abba is correct in all of these cases. All right. So number 5. Shalach Rabbi Abba Rav Yosef bar Chama. Again, Rabbi Abba sent to Rabbi Yosef bar Chama. HaOmer al Tinok ben Habanim Ne'eman. Now, this is the one, excuse me, that is relevant and why we brought this series of 7 cases. That if, in fact, somebody says that this particular child is among my children, then he's believed. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Eino Neman, and Rabbi Yochanan says he's not believed. Now, my Kamar, we didn't actually say what the statement was. We just said that somebody said something about a child among his children. So my Kamar, what did he say? Amar Abaye Hak Kamar. This is what he said. Haomer al Tinok Ben Abanim Yirish Kol Nekosai. Maybe he's saying that about this particular son that he's going to inherit everything. Neman, so he's believed. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. As we're going to see, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka is going to say in a Mishnah, actually, let's take a look in the Rashbam. There's going to be in a Mishnah on Kuf Lamed Amud Aleph that we're going to see, I guess, on Shabbos. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, fourth line in the Rashbam, in the narrow lines of the Rashbam on Kuf Chet Amud Bet. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, b'masnizin, as we're going to see in the Mishnah, im amar al misha roy liyorsho. If you say something about somebody who's capable of receiving your inheritance, that person should get the entire inheritance, dvarav kayamim, that his words are approved, his words are confirmed. Ubaskinan lekaman hilchos agavase, and we are going to say that the halacha is like him, that essentially one has the right to give all of one's property as an inheritance to one of his sons, who is entitled to a piece of the property. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Eino Neman, but Rabbi Yochanan says, this is not Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, this is a different Rabbi Yochanan. This is Rabbi Yochanan who's disagreeing with Rabbi Abba. He says, Karabanan, he says, like the rabbis in that Mishnah, and he says that he's not believed. Okay, so let's take a look. So Maskif La Rava asks an important question, because Hi Neman ve'eno Neman, Yirash velo Yirash mi baile. Why are you telling me that he's believed? There is no belief in the statement, according to Abaye. According to Abaye, the father is just saying, I'm giving all of my possessions to this son over that son. Well, there's nothing to believe. There's no testimony associated with that. It should just be that this son inherits as opposed to that son, or this son does not inherit. So why are you talking about belief? So as a result, Rava offers a different interpretation. Ella Amar Rava Hachikamar. Haomer Altinok ben Abanim. That what are you saying about one of the children among his sons? Bechorhu, you're testifying that he's your firstborn. So Neman, he's believed. And who is that like? That's precisely like Rabbi Yehuda, meaning that it's even true when you have a chazaka against it. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Eino Neman, and Rabbi Yochanan says he's not believed. Kirabanan, like the rabbis. Let's take a look at the Rashbam. Neman, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines, beginning of the line in the narrow lines of the Rashbam. Neman ka Rabbi Yehuda. He's believed, just like Rabbi Yehuda says. That even though we have a chazaka, that a different one is firstborn, shehu bachor, that a different one is the firstborn, afilu haki av Neman. Even so, the father is believed. V'haki hilchasa, and this is in fact the halacha. Daha pasik haki lekaman. In the end, we're going to say that the halacha is like Rabbi Abba in all these cases, and this is how we end up saying that this case is talking about. So in the end, we are going to say that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. So we'll pause there in the Rashbam and go back into the Gemara, and now we're up to the 6th case, and we're at the 2 dots, first set of 2 dots on Kuf Chet Amud Bet. Shalach le Rabbi Abba Rabbi Yosef Bar Chama. Tito ishti ke'echad min abanim. I want my wife to inherit like one of my sons. No tela ke'echad min abanim. Remarkably, she gets an equal share to one of the sons. She doesn't get any double portions, but she gets exactly what you said. Amar Rava b'nechazim shalach. But by the way, this only works on the properties that the husband had at that time. Meaning that if he gets something in the future, then it's not necessarily going to continue to apply, because, well, let's take a look. Rashbam is going to help us here. 1, 2, 3, 5 lines up in the narrow lines, from the bottom of the narrow lines on Kuf Chet Amud Bet. She'im nisrabu hanachasim b'shas chaluka. If the assets have multiplied at the time that they are going to be divided, Eno no tellus, she does not take. Ki'im be'otan shahayu lo b'shas amira. She only gets from the assets that he had at that time. Now, of course, if an asset itself goes up in value, that she's still going to get that. But the point is that if in fact he gets an inheritance of a new piece of property, she's not going to get that. De'ain adam magna davar shelo ba'olam, because we have a general principle that you don't transfer something that hasn't yet come into the world. And not only that, but the Rashbam adds, Va'afil Rebbe Meir. We had Rebbe Meir who says that you can transfer something that has not yet come to into the world. De Amar Adam Makna, that a person can make a kinyan with respect to those items that have not yet come to the world. Honey, Mili, those words, the mefarish. That's only when I am explicit that that's what I'm doing. Meaning, Rebbe Meir says that I can give away something that I have not yet gotten if I am explicit about doing so. So if I'm explicit about saying that something that I'm going to get, I am going to give to you, well, then I can do that according to Rebbe Meir. But here, the statement that was made was just that the wife should inherit like one of my sons. I have not said anything about what I get into the future. All right. Demistama, I'm sorry, Mefarish. Aval b'stama ein adam ma'ala al dadto davar haroilo. But and this highlighting the point that Ken made the other day that davar haroilo is similar to makna davar shelo ba'olam, that a person, Rashbam says that a person doesn't have the intention to give away something that is only in his future receivables. Aval lahachnos haroi lo lavo lahachnoso, in order to come in and make a kinyan with it. Ella davar shehu muksudbo, only the things that he has currently. The hilka hach isha yada al tachtona, and therefore the wife's hand is on the bottom. Meaning demistama lo natan la ela nechasim shahayu lo ba'otosha, that the presumption is that he only intended to give her things that he owns at that time. And if she wants to say that she's entitled to things that come in the future, she needs to show that he actually had that intention, and she would have to bring witnesses that he had that intention. And similarly, so that's one limitation that Rava offers.
How does he inherit?
What?
I'm just thinking here. He tells her you're going to inherit whatever the same like my sons. But how does he inherit something if he's no longer alive?
No, she's going to inherit.
He's correct, right? But she's going to inherit from what he gives her. But how can he give her something or inherit something so that she can inherit if he's no longer alive?
Well, that's the statement. The point is that when he's no longer alive, he's allowed to make a statement that says that she's going to get an inheritance just like one of the sons. So,
but we're talking about something that didn't come into existence yet.
No, we're talking about his possessions that exist right now.
Correct. So why do we even have a discussion about something that he doesn't even own yet that could possibly be inherited by her if he never got that possession?
Well, that's the Havamina is that we look at the world at the time of his death. And the answer is we are not going to look at the world at the time of his death. We're going to look at the world at the time that he made the statement. But you know what? It's not even a perfect match, because take a look at what Rava says next. Ubivanim haban la'achar mikan. But you know what? When it comes to sons who are inheriting, the sons that come later are counted. So, and let's take a look in Rashbam, because he explains exactly what we mean. Second wide line in the Rashbam near the end of the line. Kolomar, lo lefi cheshbon habanim sheyesh lo achshav. We don't look at just if he had 3 sons at the time that he says that his wife is going to get, and one of them is a bachor. So we would ordinarily divide the property into 4 pieces. The bachor would get 50%, would get 2 of the 4 shares, and the other 2 sons would get 1/4 shares. but now that we have the wife also getting with them, so as a result, each of the sons is going to get 20%. The Bechor gets 40%. We divide it into 5 shares. The Bechor gets 40%, 20% times 2. The other 2 sons get 20%, and the wife gets 20%. But now what happens if instead of now at the time of the death, when at the time of the statement, when they only had 3 sons, she had 6 more sons, or he had 6 sons with another wife. And now, instead of 3 sons, he has 9 sons. So how do we deal with that? So the point is so again, sheyesh lo achshav levad taflok la'achar moso v'titol chelik gadol, and she would get a larger share because he has fewer sons. Ela'af lefi cheshbon kol abanim shel shas chaluka nasanla. But rather, we look at the 9 sons that he has now. And so as a result, when she has, now the division is among 10. And so as a result, all of the assets that he had at the time that he made the statement are divided into 10 equal shares, and she gets one of them. And all the other sons get 10%. And so everybody gets 10%, with the Bechor getting 20%.
When did he have the other, when did he have the other 8 sons or 6 sons?
After he made the statement that his wife is going to inherit like with his sons. So he makes the statement, and now he has 6 more sons, because he says it when he's in his 30s. And now 50 years later, when he 80 years later, when he passes away at 120 on Mea B'Esrim, so now that he passes away, so now she gets based on the equal shares of all of the sons, not just the sons that existed at the time that he made the commitment to her.
Well, what's the chiddush here? He's saying that my sons, you're going to inherit like my sons. So but the inheritance doesn't take effect until he passes away. Correct. So it's irrelevant when he makes this. He makes a statement today, tomorrow, next year, next month, and he has.
Yes, but the whole point is that it's remarkable. What Rava has done is distinguish on 2 levels. When it comes to the assets, we focus on only what he has at this moment. But when we focus on the children, we focus on the children that he has at the time of the inheritance. And the point is that even though you might say that he's giving away something in the future, the answer is you're allowed to give away something in the future. I can give you something that I own right now. I can commit myself to giving it to you, either on Mea B'Esrim after I pass, or I can commit to giving it to you when I turn 90. I can commit it to myself to giving it to you at any point in the future. I can commit that it belongs to you. I don't know whether I can commit after my death, but the point is that I can commit to that it belongs to you at some point in the future. So the bottom line is that I do have the right to do that. So that's exactly the point. That's exactly what we're teaching. And yet, notwithstanding the fact that we focus on the moment of the husband's statement, when it comes to the assets, when it comes to the children, we focus on the moment of division. That depends on how many children. And Rashbam goes on to say, but we're running out of time, that even maybe if God forbid, any of the children were to die without any heirs, and so now there are fewer children than when the original statement was made, well, then she's going to get based on a larger share than she would have gotten originally. All right, so let's go to the last statement.
So what's the point about the assets? I mean, what's your point you're making here?
The point that I'm making about the assets is that if he inherits something 3 years later from his great-grandfather that has passed away at 120, and now he has twice as many assets, unless he remakes the statement, she is only going to get a share of the assets he had when he originally said that she's going to inherit like one of his sons. She doesn't get any of the new assets that he's inherited since then. That's the point that Rav is making. Okay. Well, if you have any further questions,
so he gets a gift now from somebody, and she's not entitled to that. Okay.
So Rabbi Abba sent a 7th ruling. If you produce a document saying that you owe somebody money, so a lender has a document and he's bringing it against the borrower. Malva Amar lo nifrati klum. The lender says, I haven't been paid anything. The lova, the borrower says, Omer parati mechta, I paid half. the Edim, and now witnesses come, Me'idim Shapara Kulo, and they say that you paid all of it. Hare Zen Nishpa. So the person who said the borrower has to swear because even though he now has witnesses that say he doesn't owe anything, his mouth has admitted to him owing 50%, and so as a result he has to swear because it's moda b'miktzas. The gova mekza minachasim ben nechorin. But when it comes to collecting the half that he admits that he owed, the creditor can only collect from unencumbered properties, meaning properties that the person still owns, not from properties that were sold after the loan was made. Now, ordinarily, if I lend you money on January 1st and you sell property on February 1st, I can collect not only against properties that are in your possession, but I can collect against that property that you sold on February 1st because that sale on February 1st was subject to my mortgage. And so as a result, I would have the right to collect that property. And you won't get as much for that property because everybody knows that I have this right. So aval lo mishubadim. Low, but I don't have the right to collect from those properties because in this case, the witnesses say that it was fully paid up. And so as a result, even though ordinarily we say that when it comes to claiming with a contract, I can claim from property that is that has been sold, that is meshubed, that is encumbered. I don't have the right here because really it's not the contract that is allowing me to take the money from Stan. It's the fact that Stan admits that he owes 50% because my contract and the witnesses saying that that the money has been repaid effectively cancel each other out, and all that's left is my claim of being owed and Stan's admission of owing half. The afilo amre, and the reason that that I will not be able to claim from Ken, who bought the property in February, because Ken is going to say, "Anan on Aiden smichinan." We were relying on the witnesses. Ken was relying on the witnesses who say the loan's been paid in full. And so as a result, we didn't think that there was any loan. There wasn't a mortgage to our knowledge. Va'afilu Rabbi Akiva. And even according to Rabbi Akiva, Da'amar, Rabbi Akiva says, that in a specific case, it's considered like returning a lost item. What case is that? So we'll do it outside because of the time. That the case is where I say that I have a contract and it says that you owe me coins. Doesn't say how many coins. I say you owe me 5 coins.
Right.
You say you owe me 3 coins.
Right.
Well, coins just means 2. And if you had said you only owe me 2 and that you, then we would believe you and you would not have to swear or do anything. So now that you said 3, according to Rabbi Akiva, it's like you're returning lost money to me. And we have a principle that when it comes to something that was lost, if I lost my computer and you bring it back to me and I say to you, well, when I lost my computer, I also had a mouse with it. Where's my mouse? You need to swear to me that you didn't find my mouse. You don't have to swear. Because of Tikkun Olam, because we want to encourage you.
Good.
You did something good, exactly. We want to encourage you to do that good thing. So as a result, we're not going to make you swear. Similarly, when it comes to this 3rd coin, you're really returning it to me because you could have said that you owe me 2 coins and you wouldn't owe me anything else. So Heika Deleka Edim. So Hani Mili, Heika Deleka Edim. When does Rabbi Akiva say that there's no obligation to swear? That's where there are no witnesses. Aval Heika Deika Edim. But when there are witnesses, Irtuse Irtas. We can say that you are worried about what the witnesses are going to say. And because you're worried about what the witnesses are going to say, you may agree, you may end up you're going to be more truthful than you would be otherwise. And as a result, it's more of a moda b'miktzas case. Now, Maskiv lo Mar Baravashi. Mar Baravashi responds, Adarabba, I would say just the opposite. Because remember, here the witnesses are testifying in Stan's defense. Of course, Stan may not have known that they were going to, but in any event, they testify in Stan's defense. Afilu Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Even Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar who argues with Rabbi Akiva, Amar Moda Mixas Hataina Havi, that in that case, when I said coins and you admit, and I say you owe me 5 and you say you owe me 3, he says that it's Moda B'Mixas and you have to swear because he disagrees with Rabbi Akiva. Hani Mili Heka Deleka Edim. That's because there are no witnesses that support you. To come Aval Heka Deika Edim to come. But here, you have witnesses that support that you owe nothing.
Right.
And so as a result, maybe we should say, therefore, even Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar would say that in this case is certainly a case of returning a lost object. So that is Mar Barav Ashi's take on this. But in the end, we say, Darash Mar Zutra Mishmei de Rav Shimi Bar Ashi, Hilchasa B'Kol Hani Shmaitasa, that the law in all of these cases, it's the way Rabbi Abba said. Well, 1 second. What about the second case where we said Amrle Ravina Rabashi to Rav Nachman Mai? What about the case of Rav Nachman? Because again, we know that the halakha is like Rav Nachman, and when we cited the case in the Gemara the first time, we said that Rabbi Abba was disagreeing with Rav Nachman. So Amrle Rav Ashi explains. Ain Govin Masnizin law. You should change it. And Rabbi Abba's report was really, we do not collect debts from inherited slaves. V'chein Amar Rav Nachman. And similarly, Rav Nachman says. And so as a result, the halakha is in fact like Rabbi Abba, and the halakha is like Rabbi Yehuda, who says that even in the case where the society thinks that Alfie is the firstborn, if the father says no, Beatty is the firstborn, well then Beatty is going to be the firstborn. And so we'll pick up from there. Tomorrow, stay tuned, as we're going to explore what was Mar Zutra trying to preclude by saying that the halacha was like Rabbi Abba in all of these cases. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And Ken, if you still have a question, I'm happy to hang on. Let me just pause and stop the sharing and stop the recording.